For those with good taste.
What is up, tasties and tastettes? Welcome to Gladiator II. It's your boy Lenny.
I'm Dante.
I'm D-Ray.
And this is movie review. We in the Coliseum up in this bitch.
Yay.
Bleep that.
Aw, damn.
Nice. I think you bleeped words you didn't need to last week.
I was just having fun with it.
Yeah,
You just got that censorship button.
yeah, the bleep button's fun.
I basically just, for the first 5 minutes, was like, I'm going to bleep anything even remotely.
So this was the long-awaited return of Gladiator to the cinema. First one coming out in 2000. I'm pretty sure it was 2000. That's why I just cut it off like that. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was 2000. Formerly starring one Gerard Butler.
Gerard?
Yep.
I've been saying it wrong this whole time.
And Connie Nielsen, right, is her name, who returns in this film.
What?
Is that her name? Connie.
Gerard? It's Russell Crowe, isn't it?
Yeah, I said Gerard Butler. My bad. I was thinking 300 before we started the podcast.
I thought you were making a joke, but then
no. Here's the thing. If we could let the veil down. Before the podcast, we were talking about movies being remade in Italy since they don't have movie theaters, and 300 was the one that was originally in my head before we talked about.
Okay,
it's such a sleepless in Seattle. You've got mail, so that's on me. Rewind. Yeah.
Rewind,
Russell
delete.
Honestly, at that time in the world, there wasn't much of a difference between Russell Crowe as Maximus and whoever Gerard Butler played in 300.
Spartacus?
I don't think that's who he played.
I made it up.
But you know what I mean? Like, there wasn't like a huge line of difference in my mind between them. Both extremely ripped and looked great without shirts on, except one looked more like a comic book.
I mean, and one had painted on abs.
Yeah, that's the comic book aspect, probably.
Yeah.
Dante, who would you have washed your clothing on their abs faster?
Wait, what?
Well, you're familiar with washboard abs. I'm just trying to figure out who you would use their abs first to rinse your clothing.
I can't picture their abs. Who's more cut? That's got to be...
Well, both were incredibly cut. That's why I had this question.
An efficiency thing, you know?
Okay.
I guess give me Jerry.
Okay. Yeah, so hypothetically, you'd like to see his abs glisten as you rinse.
I roughly rub my shirt, maybe my underwear, across them.
Give me
Are they on?
give me Xerxes.
Ooh,
okay.
I like that. Yeah. Let's get this back on track after my flub. So Gladiator 2, doing well in the box office. It's not number 1, but it is number 2 in all of our hearts.
Yep.
What are we at for numbers, gentlemans?
Currently, we are sitting at today being Tuesday after Thursday release. It is sitting at 55 million domestic, 165 international, putting it at $220 million worldwide.
Do we remember what the budget was retrospectively?
Wasn't it like 250?
Yeah, I think it was about that.
Yeah.
Which I read. So one thing really quickly. This is the first time ever where everything in the top 10 for highest grossing movies this year are sequels. Fun fact.
Interesting. That is a fun fact.
I don't like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Not relevant to this podcast necessarily, but in reading about that, apparently Venom: The Last Dance just pushed out Beetlejuice from the top 10. It's wild, isn't it?
Wow.
So really the top 11 are all sequels.
That's insane.
Yeah. So that's a cool little ditty. The other thing I read in regards to budget that was in trivia, the one thing I found remotely interesting. So Ridley Scott, when he made Kingdom of Heaven starring Orlando Bloom, at the end of that shoot, rather than it was going to cost him too much to dismantle the set. So he ended up just selling the set for $10. Give me 1 second, because I can't remember who he sold it to. Yeah, so he sold it to the Moroccan government for $10 as it was cheaper than dismantling it. He then had to rehire and buy it from the same government to use for this movie to be the city at the very start. So sick.
And do they upcharge?
Well, I'm sure it cost him a decent chunk of change. However, good forward thinking on his part to be like, we didn't dismantle it. Unfortunately, they kept it all intact, so now he can just use it again.
Use it, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think they let him use it for $10?
No, I'm sure they charged him significantly more than that. And he was like, dude, like I own it. And they were like, but like possession is.
It's like, no, you sold it.
Of the law, yeah. Well, I wonder if it was a handshake deal or if there was actually paperwork for that. And has that city just been sitting there like empty this whole time?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's weird. But kind of a cool little like Easter egg, I suppose, that's the same city from Kingdom of Heaven that we're getting at the beginning of the movie. Like I said, though, not really much in terms of trivia that was all that interesting. And we had already gone over like some of the controversy surrounding stuff from the trailer, such as like sharks in the Colosseum and all of that. So let's just get in some pros and cons on the movie. Let's go through some casting first, because there's been some response to performances in the movie, and I want to kind of get you guys' feelers on this.
Hopefully positive responses.
So the first biggest thing prior to the movie coming out that was a point of contention was the casting of Denzel in such a premier role in this movie.
Is it because he's black?
Yeah, that was the big I think question people had, is how that was going to play out. And the other thing that was interesting is they talked about the fact that he's really the only one who doesn't have a European accent in the movie, and he chose to keep his like regular speaking voice. And he kind of his stance on it was just like, so what am I going to do? Change my voice to just end up with a poorly performed African speaking voice? Like, he's like, that seems like it would take more away from the performance than it does. And they also referenced that he tried using a British accent. I forget what role, but in like 1988, and it got panned pretty badly. And they said that might have also played into his decision to not want to use any type of an accent for this.
I'll tell you right now, him not using an accent, I think, was a good choice.
Yeah, I don't think it took anything away. It's not like it took me out of the performance or anything.
Like, at the end of the day, like, they kind of framed this as like Rome was the place to be, and people kind of ended up from other places there. So it doesn't necessarily mean that he has to have a European accent. It just kind of leaves like an untold story, I think.
Yeah, I thought of all of the performances in the movie, and this was his first supporting role since 2002 in Antoine Fisher. Everything else since then, he's been in a starring role.
Damn.
I mean, and if I had to say, in my opinion, I think he was like the standout performer in the entire movie.
Yeah, I think that's been like the general consensus that I've seen reading reviews and things like that. And in my personal opinion, I agree. I think that he walking out of this movie to me like was the most like, that was fucking incredible. And like another time where I just like, you kind of bow down to the greatness that is Denzel Washington. And like, this is another feather in the cap to just a fantastic career. And it's crazy because we've been talking about age a lot, and specifically his age a lot in the past couple of weeks. And to be at 70 putting in performances like this is just like unheard of to me, really.
Well, I think age played into his favor in this role, I think, a little bit.
Yes and no. I mean, when we get to spoilers, I guess I'll point out some part of where I think it was odd. But yeah, his like, but I guess in age comes experience, and like his experience definitely rings through in just the performance that we got here. So it seems like we all agree like he was the strongest part of this entire movie, right? Like his arc, I think, was the most interesting, like just what he was able to do with it. And
just
like
kind of watching like how he was manipulating all the people around him and stuff. Yeah.
I thought it was just so well done. The controversy for performance that I've seen the most out of is Paul Mescal.
Which I actually really liked.
So I'm in the same camp, and I'm wondering if some of that's just personal bias at this point. But yeah, I think I've seen a decent amount about him potentially being miscast and people not loving him as much in it.
So, I mean, you guys kind of like talked him up leading into this movie. I had never heard this guy's name prior to like 2 months ago, leading into like talking about this movie. I have just briefly looked at some of his past work, and I don't think I've heard of any of it before. So I have no idea who he is. There were definitely parts of this where I thought it was kind of just like he didn't necessarily land his lines, but there were plenty of parts where like I did find like he was like incredibly emotional, incredibly inspirational at times, but then other times like it just, I don't know, he didn't have like the range. for some like the more quieter, like serious lines.
I thought from a physical standpoint, he performed and excelled at everything he was asked to do.
Oh yeah, all of his Gladiator choreography and like fighting and all that, like he was definitely like built very well for a lot of that.
You guys probably didn't have, because I went to like the fan event showing for this.
Oh, so they have like a talk with the cast, like
they had the three Pedro Pascal, Denzel, and him. Or no, it was Pedro Pascal,
Paul Mescal,
and the dude from Stranger Things who plays one of the
not to like kind of like segue off of what you were saying, but like I feel like it was just the three of them were heavily promoting a lot of this movie stuff.
Yeah,
a lot of the stuff for this movie. And like Denzel, I felt like did nothing.
Yeah, I mean, I saw a lot of stuff from him on the red carpet and things like that. I saw one really cool interview that he did on the red carpet with a guy who was trying to become an actor who was doing interviews. And he was saying, yeah, I do a lot of like skits on YouTube and stuff. And like, Denzel was just basically like, if you want to become a good actor, go find a local theater. Like, go find a small theater. If you want to be like me, do it as I did it, which is get yourself in front of a live crowd, get yourself in a small theater and play small roles and learn from the response of the theater goers and things like that. And that's how you become a great actor. It's not just like filming stuff independently in your house or like on sets for YouTube content. Like, that's not how you're going to learn to become a great actor. And I thought it was really cool because he took the time to give that like a legitimate answer and didn't just give like the, like a generic, you just got to keep trying. And like, sometimes it's luck meets like opportunity, like shit like that. It's like, no, like I know what I did to become great at this. And here's some real game on how to do it. But yeah, I don't know, like Denzel probably to a point, like what does Denzel need to promote? Like, people see Denzel's cast in a movie and people go see Denzel knowing what they're going to get from him in a movie. And maybe that's why there wasn't as much of a press for him to need to get himself out there. Whereas like to your point, if you haven't seen or heard of Pedro or Paul Mescal prior to this movie, and this is really a coming out for him in terms of the next level of stardom, because I think he's gotten a ton of acclaim from normal people. I mean, like that's where he got cast in this movie. And I was going to mention, originally, it was supposed to be Timothy Chalamet cast as the main role, which I think it's tough because watching him in Dune have some of like the knife fight scene and stuff, he can handle it, like, which I would have questioned prior to Dune because I don't think physically he
could get ripped enough to be like Gladiator style.
Yeah, but basically Ridley Scott saw normal people, saw Paul Mescal's performance, and that's what swayed him to go that direction as opposed to Chalamet. And then the producers, I forget which company it was, maybe Paramount or something, who produced this, they saw him in a Streetcar Named Desire or whatever, like a live performance, and they said that there was a lot of scenes where he had to like take his shirt off, and like they said that like the women in the crowd had like audible like gasps when he would like take his shirt off, and they were like, well, we're going to have so many of these scenes that require this, so like that led them to be like co-sign on the idea of him doing the role.
We can add that to your washboard list.
Yeah, let's make a top 5 washboard abs Dante with clean clothing on list. Come back to us next week with that.
Yeah, I'm going to sell my washing machine.
So yeah, I think the Mescal, like I think Dave's in the camp that I've seen the most general take on this is that like there's just scenes where they feel like Paul Mescal didn't hit completely. Again, I think coming from a position of I already really like him, I was happy with it. I think maybe the scene that stands out the most is like there was a scene, not really a big spoiler, but with him with the she's not like the queen, but like the lone like person left from the original family, from like Connie Nielsen's character,
Commodus's sister.
Yeah, like that when they're in the cell together when they first see each other. I didn't think he came through as good in that scene as I would have liked him to.
Yeah, so that's where like I kind of started like obviously thinking in comparisons between his character and Maximus in Gladiator 1. And they both tried to obviously do this like strong silent type, like when being talked to or asked questions, that you just kind of like sit there silent and stoic. Russell Crowe just kind of like dead face, like just like no care to like who's talking to him or what they're saying. And then Paul Mescal obviously tried to do the same thing, but to me, it kind of came across as more like angry and pouty versus just like.
I think in that scene, maybe it did. I do think it worked in like when he first meets Denzel Washington's character. I think that when he's like choosing not to speak, when he's asking him is like what tongue does he speak, and like I thought that worked well. I thought the first time when he was in front of the two twins, that worked pretty well too. But then I do think that like those parallels of them trying to make him and Maximus so similar, like the speech with like I didn't love the line reading of that like poem that's written on the bedroom wall. Like I didn't think that came through great for me. But one review I had heard like maybe right before I saw the movie, or it was right after, one or the other, that I think rings pretty true to my opinion on the two different films, is they said that like Gladiator 1 is much more of an emotional movie, and this movie is a lot more of an action movie. And I think that does ring true in that like the standout fights and like the action sequences in this movie, I think are a notch above that in Gladiator, but that's also just in scale. Like they just did so much more in the scale of stuff. The one detriment I think to the action in this movie is I thought sometimes the CGI wasn't great. Like I didn't think that the chimps at the beginning were that impressive looking, especially when you're dealing with all real environments. It just makes it a lot easier to see this thing that's kind of pasted onto the screen where everything else feels so like real, because that's one thing I think cinematography in this movie was incredible. Like I thought everything looked and felt so real to where you were really able to like immerse yourself. And then that was the one thing where I was like noticing like, oh, look, this is just such a computer.
Yeah, they looked really off.
I read Ridley Scott, that was all stuntmen in black, like all black outfits, who performed those scenes, and then they pasted over the chimps on top of those bodies.
That makes sense, because like there were some scenes where they were like on all fours, and you can like notably see like biceps and stuff. They looked like almost human.
Yeah, he's like basically like you put them in there in all black, you strip out the black, then you put on the flesh, you put on the hair, and that's how they were able to build those like 3D renders.
So basically all they were adding was the tail and the head. Yeah,
well, I mean, and like the fur and everything, but like those were two actual like human bodies that they were like adding that stuff onto. Yeah. Yeah. So as far as casting, just kind of continuing down that road, I suppose, Connie Nielsen, Pedro Pascal, how'd we feel with them?
I thought Pedro Pascal's character was really good. I think he did a good job, from being the general type to obviously being like the kind of, I don't know. I don't want to get into spoilers in terms of where his story went, but yeah, I think he did a good job like all around.
I definitely I think that there's parallels between him and Maximus as well. Like I think that like obviously Paul Mescal is meant to be like the mirror
continuation of that,
mirror of Maximus, but I definitely saw shades of Maximus's character in Pedro Pascal as well, in the way that it was written.
I didn't really think about that, but I definitely agree.
When was you watched Gladiator recently to get ready for this, right?
Week, yeah.
So like before he becomes a gladiator, when he's like the general of the army, like you can definitely see ideology similarities between those two characters.
Yeah, because I mean, obviously, like Maximus the general was all about, like obviously serving Rome and Marcus Aurelius, but he was all about the people. Marcus Aurelius's vision of Rome. It was all about, his soldiers, like health and safety and getting them home to their families. And early on in this movie with Pedro Pascal's character, I mean, you see him kind of go to war. And then like shortly after, you can see the emotional toll that like the battle took on him, and like how he felt like drained from obviously like having to like kill people in war, but then like just like what it did to the people that survived.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting like just message on war in general, and obviously it's taken from like early history, but like I think it still applies to the way war works just today, right? And that like there's soldiers that perform the acts of war, but those soldiers, just because they're soldiers doesn't mean that they
Share the
blindly
ideals,
blindly follow the vision of what their commander-in-chief is telling them to do. And I think that this movie is a lot of that, like, to where, like, yes, I'm in charge of acting out these things, and because of my belief in my country and my people, like, I'm going to follow through and be that person, but I have my own opinions and beliefs that don't always assimilate to that, you know? And then the Connie Nielsen thing, I think with her being like one of the few carryovers from the original to this, I thought like I think this goes to a grander opinion on the movie that I had. I was very impressed with a movie being 20 some odd years post for a sequel. That I felt like this was like a very satisfying continuation to that story. And I think that her character being a carryover and you being able to resonate with what her character dealt with in the first movie. Some of it works well with this movie. There's some things from a character standpoint that I'm like, how are you still kind of in this situation the way it is? But I think it's also understanding the way that time period worked, and that's why it was the way it was, you know. But I thought she was very good in the role.
I thought she was pretty good in the role. I was just heavily confused with why her character was like really even a part of the movie, though, which I'll get into in spoilers.
Yeah. So I like, well, before we get into spoilers, I'll just like I kind of already said my opinion. Like I was genuinely very satisfied with this as far as a continuation. I think it's about as good as a sequel I could ask for something 20 years post. I think especially knowing how Ridley Scott's like movies have performed and have been looked at since Gladiator. I think that he's had ups and downs, and maybe more downs than ups for some people, especially with like success in these types of things. And I thought he made a great movie that I was caught up in basically from start to finish with these performances from people that I think you have to give a nod to him with his casting, because I mean, it's not like taking a leap on Denzel Washington or something, you know, where like, you know how great of an actor he is, but to cast him in that role, I think took a step because there's a reason that like people just didn't see it initially. But you trust that he is going to perform that way.
I mean, I know we even talked about it, right? It's like when we saw that casting decision, we were like, well, how does he fit into this story given the time period and everything and how it was?
And I think getting into spoilers, they answered it. And I think that's where you can have questions from the trailer on the casting, but it was almost like they knew that there was going to be questions on the casting. And I think they gave you a satisfying answer to how he fit into all of this in a realistic way. So, I really, really enjoyed this. It landed really well for me personally. And I think there's definitely critiques I can have from a movie standpoint. However, from just a viewing experience, I was just blown away, like seeing it at IMAX and like just the way everything visually took me in. And like, from start to finish, I really enjoyed this whole thing.
Yeah, I'm of that same opinion.
Same for you?
Yeah. Definitely enjoyed the movie. It's definitely one of my higher rated movies so far this year. So,
okay. With that being said, let's jump into it. 3, 2, 1.
Spoiler.
Spoiled.
Oh, switching it up. All right.
I'm just getting ahead of it.
3, 2, 1. Rotten.
Okay. Where should we start with spoilers here? Because we're not going to go like line by line or scene by scene with this or anything.
I kind of want just like quick note at like the very beginning of this movie, they give you the quick little text synopsis of like
the photo book too, like little setup, like the flip book thing.
Well, I just meant like the lines on the screen that kind of just give you a brief history of what happened from between then and now. And it just kind of tells you like, hey, between Maximus's death and now, like Marcus Aurelius's vision of Rome is dead. And then in come these twin emperors. There was no like explanation as to like, I guess, what led to these two like little shithead kids getting in charge.
Yeah, like who took over Rome
and then gave it to these kids.
Yeah, who
there
passed
was
it down to them. Yeah,
I just like that's just a question that could have easily been answered in one like text line in that same little paragraph at the
Yeah,
beginning.
or just like I said, like I liked the flip book that kind of walked you through the first movie for anybody who hadn't seen it, but you could have added just a little thing of like somebody taking over power and passing it on
like
to their
is
kids.
it that person's kids, like, or how did somebody Rome was supposed to be handed to the Senate?
Yeah, how
so
did the Senate let it get itself get taken over by one singular person? Yeah, I think that was definitely something to where I think in the positive for the movie, where it's 2 hours and 30 minutes, like it's such an early little, like, and it's not an actual scene, it's just the text that you kind of just forget about it throughout the movie. I think they did a good job of like, just throw this in here at the beginning to give you context for why we're here, but we're not giving you the answers and you won't remember this by then. You'll just kind of accept that.
It is what it is.
Yeah. But I definitely agree because there's not even a reference to them speaking about their parents or anything that would have led them to being in the role. Not that I can remember, at least.
No.
I do think part of that is like the dialogue's fantastic, but at times like the dialogue, you can kind of get lost in it a little bit because of the way the speaking is for that time period. Like, it's not as easy to follow, which I think is where like Denzel stands out so much. And this is where not having the accent and like speaking more like his traditional self, I feel like everything he said, like
resonated with you a little more.
Like, very digestible and like just kind of stuck with you more. So the knock I'll say from a spoiler perspective for me is like the first 10 minutes of this movie are a little too similar to the layout of the original movie.
You're talking about like the opening battle scene?
Well, like not the like
right after like
the battle scene. Okay, first of all, the original Gladiator opening battle scene is far superior to this one, I think. But I mean more so like Lucius has a wife, and that wife has to die to spurn like the motivation for the rest of the movie. He already hated Rome.
I guess, you're right.
But to like spurn his like hatred and his desire to get revenge and like, to motivate the character is very much what Maximus has happened to him in the first movie. And I think the tough thing there is the way it happens to Maximus is so much more brutal than the way it happens to Lucius. Or Lucius, is that
Lucius? You were right.
But like it's so much more brutal that like Maximus finds his wife and his kid burned and hung at his home, and like that visual, just like
it's a little bit more scarring than.
Yeah, I saw an interview also with Russell Crowe just talking about that scene. Originally, you saw this, Dave, where he was talking about it when originally Ridley Scott just wanted him to fall to his knees and like see his kid and like look at him, but it was Russell Crowe's decision to actually go up and like hold the feet of his wife and like hold it, and like he felt like it was far more impactful. Ridley didn't exactly agree, but he let him do it, and then once he saw it, it was just like, that was fantastic, but just less snot, because if you watch the way it's filmed, like there's boogers just like attaching to the foot and stuff. But yeah, like I think that's where I go back to that review. I think standing very true to me is that there's just so much more emotion that resonates through the Maximus performance that I don't think you feel as much in the performance of this movie. I think that there's definitely moments, but
because I think they try to give you that kind of moment with the Grim Reaper scene.
Oh yeah. But because you get like Maximus in the field, like he flashes back throughout the movie too. But yeah, no, I think the scene that lets me down the most from an emotional thing, and like where we're not going scene by scene, I guess I can jump ahead a little bit here. The scene that I think misses on emotion for me, and I think it's just in the way it was set up, there wasn't a way for it to be emotional, but his mother dying should have felt more emotional.
When she got like shot right over his shoulder.
Yeah, and I think because it's in the midst of the battle, he just can't like linger on it, and especially where he has to go and chase after, what was Denzel's name in the movie? You guys just saw it, so I would love if you knew.
Started with an M.
Macrinus,
that's what it is.
But like I guess like in just the way that the film was set up, he couldn't like linger on that. But you just never had this moment. Like he comes back after it and his mother's gone already, like there's just not this moment. And like one of the most poignant moments of the original is like actually having Maximus getting carried off and like having this moment where he like is dying and gets that closure and stuff. And you just didn't necessarily get that between Lucius and his, his mother that he just now is rekindling any type of a relationship with after 16 years. And you never, like, it just was kind of, it happens and then it's moved on from a little quickly. And I think that was one of the emotional misses for this movie, is that the deaths didn't feel like they hurt as much in this.
Can I ask a question? How do we feel about the sharks in the Coliseum now that we've seen it?
I think it goes back to my CGI point where, like, it definitely didn't feel as real as so much of the other fight sequences in the movie. But I enjoy, and I guess, like, they really did, like, that type of scenery they just didn't have sharks. Like, they filled the Coliseum with water. They did do, like
crocodiles and stuff. Probably.
Yeah. Like so I overall enjoyed that sequence because I'm at a movie and I'm at an action movie, and I think that, like, that's another one of those set pieces, especially where you guys didn't see it in IMAX. I thought, like, some of those fight sequences are, like, why IMAX is as great as it is. Like, it just felt massive.
Yeah.
And they did such a good job of, like, the first movie did this as well, with, like, the feeling of the Coliseum and, like, the electricity of, like, that environment really coming through in the movie. I think it does a good job of that.
I liked it simply as, like, a piece to, like, break up the battles, and it's not
Feels different.
just hand-to-hand combat. It kind of it gave it a different feel and kind of resets you for, like, a 2.5-hour movie to not feel all the same.
Did it feel earned, though, that he became the leader the way that he did? Because it made sense in the first movie why Maximus became kind of the pseudo leader of the group of gladiators.
I think they tried to do it with the scene with the rhino.
Yeah.
And it just didn't hit, I don't think, as well.
But even before the scene with the rhino, so, like, I was more in the camp of the one guy who's like, why the fuck should I listen to this guy?
Well, that was the scene with the rhino.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying, though, is, like, why did everybody else there feel so, like, and willing to follow without any explanation?
I guess, yeah, he did get them to follow right before him, but maybe they just were like, I don't know, we don't know what to do, so I guess we'll follow somebody.
I think they saw him be a better fighter, and that's really the only explanation, is that, like, he has the fight with the chimps that they saw. He fights hand to hand with the guy who he has to fight like right off the bat, right? Like, so I think they saw how tough he was, and that would be the explanation as to why he was kind of the pseudo leader. But it just felt earned with Maximus in the first one, whereas this one was a bit more like it's just assumed that you're the leader because you're the lead in this movie.
Yeah. I also feel like in a lot of those, like, Coliseum scenes, they maybe focused a little bit too much on him. Like, for example, like the chimp scene, right? Is like you see his chief or whatever get mauled in the beginning, right? But then everything after that is pretty much just the fight with Paul Mescal's character in the chimp.
And then it ends, and you see that there's, like, 6 other people alive, but you
never saw their battle.
The entire scene looks like everybody was just getting murdered, but
and also, like, there was no I don't know. There was no, like, strategy to anybody else's fights, it would seem, from an outside perspective. So why were they all able to get...
He got the rhhino to crash into the wall, and then it was just a 1v1 fight when you had, like, 8 other guys just, like, chilling and, like, watching.
I wish they showed more of, like, what the impact did to the rhino.
It showed that it, like, splintered its horn, but
yeah, because that's what I was expecting, is that it would show, like, his horn got, like, broken off from slamming into the wall, basically.
Yeah.
I think that those are some of the things where it's just like, well, he's the lead, so, like, we just need to gear everything towards him. Whereas it did feel like there was definitely a relationship between him and the other gladiators, and I think they did a good job when they weren't in the Coliseum of establishing, like, friendships and relationships with, like, even
right
just
after the monkey fight.
Yeah, the first time he sits down at the table and they all kind of make fun of him, and then, like, these moments after that. I did think when he was doing the rowing thing that there was going to be a scene where they all decide to walk back and, like,
jump in with him.
Yeah.
You were thinking of, like, your classic, like, sports movie.
Yeah.
Coach Carter, where everyone just chips in for the push-ups and the laps.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I thought that that's what was going to happen there. But what I do like about that not happening is, like, I thought that the doctor character,
Ravi,
who ends up playing, like, a pivotal role in the entirety of the movie, but I thought his character was very good as far as just, like, a a voice that could fill in some plot details about that gap in time that you're talking about, Dave, where we didn't get a ton of answers. I thought he was able to answer some of those things
kind
for
of
you.
bridge the lore.
Yeah, a little bit, as a character that kind of survived through both times. But then also just in terms of somebody who didn't have any care as to who Lucius was, right? Like it was just him as a person who he was there for.
Yeah.
And the rest didn't matter so much.
It almost seemed like he picked up the pieces on who he was, but they never confirmed that he actually knew.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, until he tells him.
Yeah.
The biggest thing in spoilers I think that we need to talk about is Denzel's character, because I think this movie, while he's a supporting role, like his arc is where this movie lives and dies.
Yeah.
Just the coming in from an outside perspective of not truly just assuming that the two emperors again are the bad guys, right? But just true, like
I think the two emperors were kind of weak, to be honest.
But they're supposed to be, like, they're not fighters themselves.
No,
you know what
I just mean like weak in their performance. Like they weren't really prominent, I don't think.
I don't know. I thought
I'm
they
not saying it was a
played, like,
bad performance. Like I think everybody in this movie did good, but I think they were on the lower scale of it.
I mean, I think they played their role well enough where like they were just psychotic enough.
They were supposed to be like a little weaselly dudes who couldn't do it themselves.
They
but
were
like,
handed power. They didn't take it. They're not smart and educated. They just kind of go with the flow.
Everything's emotionally driven for them. Like if they like when they feel slighted, like what's their first response is to lash out. Like and I think even with their relationship, I loved what they were able to do. And this is what Denzel's character picked up on, right? And like used to tear it apart. And that's where I think like the brilliance of the Denzel character comes through, is like not knowing what his true role was going to be. And even as the movie progresses, when you first meet him, you're like, okay, like, is he a bad guy or is he just a promoter who, like, I'm looking at it from like a person who's like grown up being an MMA fan now and like follows like combat sports. Like he's just a promoter. He's fucking Dana White. Like he's Dana White and they're Trump, you know, like that's what I'm watching in a way.
No, I feel that like they never really established like a polarity with his character until like the later half of them. Yeah.
It's just, you slowly see him. He finds this gladiator who, and he says it like throughout the movie that like the greatest thing about a gladiator is not like the fact that he kills, it's that he entertains. And he's able to use that entertainment factor to continue growing his levels of esteem and then leveraging things like the bets that he was making to gather power, and then learning that power is information and taking, and then like the bomb dropping of like, he was like a purchased slave and like he did watch the way the people at power worked themselves, and instead of being offended, he took that stuff and put it in the back of his head to create his own plan and create his own lane and his own future. And just then, like, once you start seeing all these little dominoes of like the bet stuff just seems like normal when he first starts doing it. Like there's something that you would do, but then he keeps winning the bets, and then you start seeing him use that as leverage with the Senate. And then knowing what information does in a world like that, and him taking that information and leveraging it for his own personal power, and in a way trying to manipulate Lucius by being like, you wanted this man's head on a stake. Like, he was the one thing you asked me for at the beginning of this movie, is I want to fight him. And I give you the fight, but it's not in the way that you think that I'm giving it to you. It's really that I've manipulated everything outside of this to put him in a position where he has to be in this fight for me to gain positive like power and leeway from these two idiots that are in charge, you know?
And even up until that point where he gets him in the ring with him, or in the Coliseum with him, I still wasn't entirely sure if it was for his own personal gain or if that was just a byproduct of it. It almost felt like, oh, hey, he's just trying to keep his word. You know what I mean?
think, you know, it's for his personal gain by the fact that he has learned that that is the son of either Maximus or was it Commodus, right? Like,
well, I think he picked up on the fact that it was Lucilla's son, not who the father was.
But the whole here's one question I do have is that, like, if he's the son of Maximus, does that then make him the heir to the throne, or was it only because they think he's the son of Commodus that he would be the son to the heir to the throne?
Well, he was the only living male descendant of Marcus Aurelius.
Yeah, like I just feel like there was a line when they first were talking about him, about her sending her son away, was for the fact that he was Commodus's son, not because of anything to do with Maximus. Because I didn't know if that, like, because it's
it had nothing to do
the
with
female
either.
lineage takes away from him being like the heir. I didn't know.
It had nothing to do with who the father was. It was just the fact that now, like, he was the quote unquote like emperor just based on lineage. being the bloodline. And him being 12 years old, like, people were just going to try to kill him because he was easy to kill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and that stuff all, like, I didn't mind her sending him away being like the story to all of this. I do think it's like a little bit. You really moved on. Like, you know, like, you never went and tried to find him. It just kind of was like he was sent off into the abyss, and you understand why his character would feel slighted from that, you know?
Yeah, but then, like, they didn't really give, like, a forgiveness scene. It was just like all of a sudden he saw her chained up in the middle of Colosseum and was like, I want to save her now.
Well, I think the forgiveness scene was actually Pedro Pascal that led to that. It's the scene when he is fighting Pedro Pascal and he tells him that your mother loves you and all of that, and where he forgives Pedro Pascal and doesn't want to kill him is the forgiveness scene.
I guess yeah, that makes sense.
So I want to bring up my, like, earlier point, like, where I'm just confused as to, like, I guess I understand the plot point of, like, Lucilla being in this movie, Connie Nielsen's character, but, like, I don't know, why is she still part of this, like, I don't know, like, it crowd in, like, the emperor's, like, little area? Like, she is the sister of a former emperor, and then we, like I said, we have no idea who else got put in power after that, and then they put the power into these two kids. Like,
I think there's
what
two
is
parts.
her role?
I think there's two parts to answer your thing, though. I think for why she's where she is that everything that they're doing and what that box represents is political power. And she is still the same as Pedro Pascal's character is viewed as a significant figure to the public of Rome. I think her character is a carryover from a golden time that they perceived in a change in Rome for the people. And even though the powers that be didn't allow it to happen, the people are still yearning for that time. And positioning her as a ally is mediating
control over the people.
Yes. So, like, that's what I think that is. Now, my question that I would have off of all of that, and I think what it is she's waiting for the right time to reclaim power. The problem is that the only reason this ever works out is a plot device. It's that her son ends up coming back to Rome. Because if that doesn't happen, in where she never went to find her son, like, this is where it would almost make more sense that she had been looking for him and trying to find him and was unable to, because she wants to reclaim power of Rome and build it back in her father's vision. And instead, it's just by happenstance that he falls back into her lap and comes back into her life by a war that she had no idea that he was going to be a part of. And I think that's the one flaw in the whole logic, is that, like, her reason for staying would be that she wants to reclaim Rome, which her and Pedro Pascal's character talk about, right? Like, but you were going to take it by force, when in all reality out there was a way that you could very easily do this, you know? Mm. So I have no problem with her still being, like, in that room and being a part of it, because I think it makes sense for the two twins to want her there, because they feel like they can control her, but also need her from a public perception standpoint. And it makes sense for her wanting to stay involved, because if she stays close, her plan to take back over is easier to do. But you see Denzel Washington implement it in such a better, more strategic way, where their plan was to just bring an army of Roman to take over by force. His thing was just like manipulate everything, yeah, and then cause strife between the two twins and leverage things that he's learned about them as people, you know, to take over. And I thought that was the beauty of the movie, where, like, that's the thing that puts it over the edge for me, is just the execution of his particular arc in the movie. The one thing that does bother me, going back to his age, though, is, and, like, you as a viewer don't know that he's 70, but just we've been talking about it so much, yeah, that watching him in, like, a 20-something-year-old Paul Mescal, like, fight, and Paul Mescal kind of getting his ass whooped a little bit for a minute there, and I'm like, well, this dude's 70. Like, he should not be whooping your ass right now, you know?
Fair.
Like,
fair.
That was the only thing in the back of my
like,
head.
You get knocked off the horse should have been the end of you.
Yeah. Yeah. You should have broke a fucking hip, buddy.
Yeah.
But I do love, like, the violence in this movie, like there's just some like
I thought the fight scenes felt really good for the most part. Yeah,
like in like just like him getting his hand chopped off, and like you getting to really visually see it, and like obviously this is rated R, and it's a hard R rating, you know, for this movie. Whereas like we talk about like Red One last week and how like you don't even get a drop of blood from that movie, and it's like a PG-13 film. I think this movie just shows like that gore isn't like necessarily a disgusting thing, but it does lend to the impactfulness of like the action scenes that you get in this movie.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah. I think they used it in a pretty like tame way.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know if tame is the right word. Maybe tasteful. Like
tasteful.
I guess. Yeah. It made sense to why it would be as vicious as it is, but it wasn't like gore for the sake of gore. It was like everything when it happened for a reason. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other takes on the movie? No.
I think I've said all that I can say.
Okay. So I have this rated number 2 for me for the year.
It's number 3 for me.
And I gave it 4 stars, I want to say.
It is at number 7 for me.
Okay.
I give it 4.5 stars.
I gave it 3 at 4.5 stars as well.
It's only 3.4 stars on Rotten Tomatoes, or not on Letterboxd, which I find interesting.
Really?
Wow. So general consensus is like we're definitely on the higher spectrum, which I've seen this whole time, of like reviews for this movie. But for me, yeah, second favorite movie of the year. I think that the action rivals Dune 2, but I just think like the execution of what Dune 2 was able to do.
Dune 2 definitely built a world and a story a lot stronger than this.
Yeah, and I think where like the strongest performance in this is your supporting role, where like Timothée Chalamet is just fantastic in Dune 2, and as the lead, I think is the one who carries so much of the weight in Dune 2 versus this movie where like I did love Paul Mescal, but like he can't touch the performance of Timothée Chalamet in Dune, I don't think. And it's like really you end up with Denzel being the one from a supporting role that carries the bulk of what makes this movie great to me.
Fair.
But yeah, let us know where you guys stand out there. Was this a good sequel? Was there anything we missed? Any holes in plots that we didn't like mention? Anything out there from a performance standpoint that you guys really like that we missed out on? We'd love to hear it. Any other questions for the folks out there in the ether?
Not a question as much as a request. If you guys would be so kind as to drop a like, comment down below, subscribe. Hit that notification bell.
I'll tell you what, if you've made it this far and you do like the video, if we get like, I don't know, how many likes to get the top 5 washboard abs out there from you, Dante?
You know what? I'll make it easy for you guys. Give me 10.
Yeah. And then we'll release the list. We'll release the Dante washboard abs.
Release the documents.
Yeah. Until next time, though, folks, we bid you folly adieu.
Peace.
Strength and honor.
Tomorrow?
For those with good taste.